Welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. And today we're going to dig into areas that I think all of us, even our high performance people, oftentimes may not realize that they've got blocks. And I know that it happens. I know from my own personal evolution in the years that I've been in business, but very much so within startups and startups changing out to be scale stage and growth stage and all of that. And sometimes you have these companies that I call sort of in the Midland, that they just sort of plateau and nobody really knows why that is and what's going on. It seems like they should hit milestones. So in this episode, my special guest, William Lamb, will share his experience and insights on how to achieve success in the competitive world of startups. We'll discuss raising capital, developing effective business strategies, and overcoming challenges to build a successful startup. And then the even harder challenge to leap the capital and operational abyss to scale the business to exit. We're going to dig into the value of long-term goals versus short-term goals, which his insights on that I think are really, really relevant. And if you are an investor and wondering why your founders don't hit their milestones when on paper, when they talk to you, they seem so doable, or if you are, as a founder, have ever felt there was some kind of invisible wall limiting your progress, this podcast episode is for you. Or if you're the CEO of a company, maybe not a startup, and you hear you have to do this or get this in your business or to do this to succeed, and the latest, way to do Y, X, or Z, right? Or if you're an investor that ever felt you were going to miss out on an opportunity, even though the bells and whistles were saying, don't make this mistake. If you ever felt you were making a financial decision or a merger or a partnership, or you have a troubled customer and you can't fire that customer, or if someone approached you to get you to invest and you didn't know how to say no or walk away, that's FOMO. That's the fear of missing out. And sometimes we make these decisions based on that, and there's actually something else that's driving you on that. If you feel you can't get to the mountain, or you got to the mountain, but you just can't climb it successful, then this episode is for you, because William Lamb is a pioneer in mental programming, and he's the founder of a company called Upgrade, which is spelled UPGRD. UPGRD. That's the website as well. And it's unlock what is inside, rewiring your brain and your motivation. And it is with everything that we've got going on around us, all of the economic uncertainty, the political turmoil that we have, war happening, fortunately not in this nation at this time, but all of that anxiety, depression, hopelessness, apathy, anger, violence, it all can be addressed when you rewire your mind, because what happens between your ears, it's often opens up the opportunities, but could derail our potential. It isn't just self-help. This is a reboot of your mental programming. So as William likes to say, wishing you all the success to make our world a better place and people happier. Welcome, William Lamb, to the Compassionate Capitalist Show.
Thank you. Wow, that was a heck of an intro. That was amazing.
Yeah, good. So
I'm even
now,
captivated. I'm like, wow, who is this person you're talking about?
well, that's what I'm excited that you're on the show. I mean, I've been looking into what you're doing and everything, and I think I really do think our audience is going to get tremendous potential out of this. So, and they're all striving to either either go from millionaire to multimillionaire, or to be averageer to a millionaire. And like you just said, you just spent this, like, before you, I guess last weekend or before, coaching a bunch of millionaires. So we're just excited that we're going to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes getting some golden nuggets from you. But
Be my pleasure. It would be
so
my
not
pleasure.
long ago, you were running a products company called Dark Matter.
Dark
What was
energy. Yes.
Dark Energy? Oh, I thought it was Dark Energy. I got that wrong. It'll
Yes.
be right. And
Darkenergy.com. You're
okay, it'll be.
good.
But I think we sort of talked about it. Maybe that's why I put the dark matter into there. But what was the catalyst for change? That, the company's still out there. So what triggered leaving that company and discovering and building your own brand of coaching and transformational belief shifting?
So it was a need personally. When I was in that startup, just like many startup entrepreneurs, we went and raised capital. We actually did on Kickstarter, raised a couple of rounds, a few $100,000 together, and it was great. It was a great seed round, and we got up and running. Yet, just like most humans are running on an improvised operating system, meaning the system that's running our mind, there's an operating system whether we know it or not. And that operating system is largely built on our personal experiences as well as the experiences of the people who taught us, whether it's our parents, teachers, or the culture and the environment we grew up in. So this operating system oftentimes is not done by design. It's improvised. So as I was running on that operating system, I found myself just like a computer. Even if you're given a supercomputer, but you run an old, outdated, buggy system, it won't perform. And I was feeling that I was working so hard, yet not getting the results I felt like I could. And there were people that I knew that were not any smarter than me or my business partner, and probably working half as hard, getting phenomenally more results. So I got curious, and that led to me discovering this field called mental programming.
Okay. So good. And so you became a student of it yourself and then tweaked it to make it even better for you to do the upgrade?
Yeah, gladly I will explain that. So it all began when I took a training, and I was just taking the training for myself, wasn't planning on building anything. And in the training, they asked me, what's the one thing when I got it because of the training will make it the greatest investment ever? And I thought at first I wanted to say money, but quickly I realized I wanted something at that time was more meaningful to me, which was having the relationship of my dreams. And I felt like that was lacking because I was working so much and ignoring or neglecting my personal life. So they asked me to design what I want. And, coming from an engineering background, I thought, well, if I'm going to design, I'm going to write a spec sheet. I'm going to have a Excel spreadsheet that literally have, rows and columns prioritized, scoring system, everything. So I wrote down 83 attributes, prioritized them, and they were like, well, you design it, you take massive action, and you install it, which was a special methodology I learned back then. Because typically plenty of people write down what they want, but they don't have what they want. But there was that installation process that's missing. So I learned that, and I set a goal for 5 months, and sure enough, 4 months and 3 weeks later, I got engaged. And what was strange to me was the same day I set the goal, she broke up with her fiance. At the time, she was engaged. So I thought, wow, what are the odds? And so from there, I decided, you know what? If I could design and this shows up, what else could I design? So I went back for more training because I wanted to get really precise. And that was the beginning of me discovering it for myself. And then when I got back and I designed my ideal clients and they started showing up, and then more started showing up, opportunities and connections. And so roughly about 2015, 2016, I decided I'm going to build this because at first it was to fund more training, to be honest. I wanted to take more training. And then very quickly I realized, wow, I found a gold mine. Especially, I knew that if I could tweak it in a way that makes it applicable and easy to apply and user friendly for the modern entrepreneurs.
Yes, absolutely. Because one of the things this is like talk about that sort of for let's talk about at the first stages of raising capital when a company's a startup and they've got this idea stage and there's this sort of there's two things that I find entrepreneurs do a lot of times. One, they sort of have a build it and they will come mentality because they love what they're doing.
Mm.
They just think it's the best, and they may or may not have fully evaluated their marketplace to really establish the need and the demand for it, all that kind of stuff. So they will, when investors are not enthusiastic about it, they shift the blame to the investors. The investors don't get it, they don't understand, they're so stupid, something like that, right? And then say they get to a point and they have started raising capital, and or they've got, they've done some friends and family, because friends and family will invest based off of enthusiasm. They typically don't have the same level of experience as business angels to identify these red flags. So they get some things going, they get really good pitch decks, they get going, they go to these and they spend a bunch of money on pitch events and things like that, and then they don't follow up with the investors that are interested. So I have a whole thing about your funnel, your capital funnel and strategy. And they don't follow up with them because they latch on to the 2 or 3 that they first start talking to. And even though they may have 10, 15, 20, 30 other ones, they just don't, and for me, I believe it's this fear of rejection. So they blame, and then they don't pursue and follow through. So this could apply to sales as well, but I know that it applies to startups raising capital because I've seen it again and again over many, many, many years of working with them, where I have to coach them out of that mindset, right? That you just have to, and so I like your perspective, and for our listeners here, because it's hard to raise capital. So you've been through that process. You advise, I'm sure plenty of founders. Where does the mental block happen? How is it, what would you say to somebody that says that might be making those kind of excuses or limiting their own success because they're not even following through on the opportunities or leads that they have?
Love that question. And that happens a lot, right? I remember witnessing myself and or my co-founders and or other business partners going through the same thing. And when I started building Upgrade, I began to realize one of the first things I began to realize was, and it's very much in parallel. I was taking trainings that were not cheap. They were quite expensive. And because I thought, you know what, if I could out invest other people, then I can get to the bottom of it and really find the good stuff. And you really, I mean, in this world, not every single time it's true, but in general, we do get paid what we do get what we pay for. So I sought out some of the best because I was wanting to make sure my time was well spent. Well, that being said, during that time, I had to do sales for this new concept I was developing called Upgrade. Back then, it was brand new. Nobody knew what it was. It felt like fundraising because at the end of the day, I was inviting people to invest in themselves. But frankly, they were also investing into me being able to go and do more trainings and or develop it. And quite a few million dollars later, quite a few millions later, we found ourselves in a really good situation where we're able to deploy larger research projects. Last year, we hired scientists. And all of this being said comes back to answering, oftentimes entrepreneurs, they don't believe they deserve to be able to do what they want. And that fear of rejection is a symptom of that fear.
Mhm.
And that fear, if we go deeper, sometimes has to do with self-worth, sometimes have to do with self-esteem, or both, or frankly, it's a perception of self issue. And if there's that limitation, what we find is they will exhibit behaviors that will keep them at asking the number that they actually feel deserving of, and they'll keep approaching other investors that may not actually be that interested to prove to themselves that they don't deserve the numbers that they desire. And it's all too common. And when someone changes that, in fact, just a few weeks ago, one of our clients, she's raising capital and she's doing a fantastic project, ESG type project. Um, and she reached out wanting to see if I was interested in investing. And I was actually very interested. And for years, I heard about this project. So I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. But the problem was she reached out to my old phone number. So I didn't even hear about it until I saw her last week. And then she's like, oh, I did message you. I'm like, I didn't get it. And I was like, oh, I didn't give you my new number. And then she's like, oh, no. right? She's like, I didn't know if you like, I didn't want to bug you. I was like, no, no, no. Like, I give you permission. If you have a project like this, reach out until I respond. Because if I don't want it, I will tell you to your face,
Mm-hmm.
right? But not a lot of entrepreneurs will see that, right? They're like, oh, people are ignoring me, therefore they're probably not interested. I don't want to get rejected. But a lot of it has to do with self-worth. So we would begin there typically with entrepreneurs to help them identify that and then elevate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so right on because the whole, like, even that follow up and follow through. And I when I'm coaching companies on raising capital, I would say their investors are big boys and girls. They know how to say no. They achieved a certain level of success because they have navigated this stuff and become leaders and strong and being able to, for the most part. Now there's Johnny come latelys and the FOMO that we'll get to, that makes them make emotional decisions themselves sometimes. But for the most part, you may not, if you don't want to be like feeling like you're pestering them, so you don't have to leave a message every time, but you call them, and you just try to catch them, and then in a normal kind of a cycle of following up, then you leave a message, or you give them an update, because you should be, as an entrepreneur, updating your existing investors, and your investors are sitting on the fence on your milestones, so you can continue to create goodwill with all of them and move some of those investors off the fence into your deal. And then courtesy call, hey, did you get my update email? We've got some exciting news, please look at it, and we're having a call in 2 weeks for you to answer any questions. Those kind of things, it takes not even a minute, you know what I mean? But you've got some positive news to drop, because everybody gets busy, everybody gets distracted, and it may not be a reflection on your business itself. If they don't get it, they'll tell you they don't get it, and then that's a whole nother thing to deal with, right? So
Yeah, and a
um
lot of them are just busy, these
yeah,
investors.
they are, right? They got, and sometimes it's personal stuff, sometimes it's business stuff. It's just, and if they're a really active investor that are on a lot of boards, they've got all kinds of that stuff going on. So let's dig a little bit into this perception of self part of it and the deserve piece, because I sat through an exercise a while back, and I've the phrase, and I think, and so I figure you might have some of this yourself. It was you don't have what it takes, right? And so if the when somebody says that to you, and this goes to the some of the stuff we were talking about at the beginning, right? The archetypal stuff, the stuff that comes from your environment and the influence. And if you've had somebody negative, that has, in order to build themselves up, they put you down as you're growing up, and you plant those seeds, right? So that's this. So what do you do when you have a prospective client or somebody that you're talking to, that's trigger phrases? So people listening now, if they were to hear that, if it hits them like, no, that's not true, or ooh, that's true, oh, I feel that, that would be that they've got bad programming. Do you have certain phrases or certain things that you do that would be an indicator to somebody listening that they need to reprogram themselves a little bit?
Yeah. So anything when they hear it and they feel a negative response or like they need to react to it. For example, what you just said, right? You don't have what it takes. Imagine if an investor says that to an entrepreneur, or you're not good enough, your product's not good enough, this will never work. I don't have the time for you, don't have the money for you, I don't believe you, I don't believe this will work, all of the above and more. If any of those statements that I just said, I mean, people are welcome to go back and listen to what we just said and play it in slow speed and see which one hits them. Because if it hits them, there is something in their code
Yeah.
that literally indicates to us they don't believe in that product or in themselves. Because if you actually have total confidence, which oftentimes an entrepreneur, especially the first time, may not have that, but even second time around, I work with founders that have done multiple $100 million deals with large companies like Disney, Fidelity. They still have those feelings. when someone told them that, right? So if we can fix that, what happens is lessons learned will not repeat itself. The unconscious mind will actually stop seeking investors that will continue to trigger that,
Yeah.
which then that's nice.
Yeah. Well, you get, as you dial in, right? I say, you have to dial into your avatar of who's your ideal investor. Same thing with investors. I say you have to have an avatar of your ideal investment. And what does that look like? Because everything else becomes noise. You have to dial that in so you can, be the most productive with your time along those things. So when somebody, one of the things that I noticed that we've have a lot of challenges with companies all the time, and investors have this all the time, what the promise of what the startup, that the level of energy, the level of bravado, the make it to, fake it till we make it, any of that stuff that startups, that founders have to do, because they are dealing with a lot of unknowns. And part of, we use this phrase with women entrepreneurs, be comfortable, or people of, color, be comfortable in your skin so you can portray this confidence, but it's also comfortable in your numbers, that you've done your research. So sometimes when they start, so they don't really know that. So it's okay to know that you don't know everything, as long as you're ready, you're open to receiving and learning what you don't know, and take the advice of people, because you have common goals and things like that, right? So then but still, a lot of times startups are wearing lots of hats. They have to do lots of different jobs. They may be really good at certain ones and not this stuff, because they have limited resources, limited money, limited people, limited just stuff. And so when they start to scale, most people blame the fact that most scale companies fail because they don't thrive or scale. But if you look at any entrepreneurial portfolio, VCs are the ones that came up with it. Angels do it out of 10 companies, right? Two will fail. A lot of times that's circumstances, just, it's just normal business stuff. And then there's this group in the, what I call the Midland companies. They're the ones that they have hit their first couple milestones, but they didn't hit the big milestones. So they didn't raise their next rounds of capital, either industry or stage or whatever. They didn't. So they find themselves just sort of growing organically, instead of continuing to thrive like a venture backed company. And they miss out on the ability to they can't get more angel money because of the same issues. They can't get venture capital money, and they're too small for private equity funds, right? But it's also this thing of that, and this is, to me, I think this is real golden nugget territory we're going to enter in here. Okay, William, that you've got these companies that they have to create that, they don't want to go out and get the rejection for raising capital, so they don't raise capital in a timely manner. They just hold on to this belief that they can just scale by revenue enough to achieve their goals, which, if they're going to be a 50 or $100 million company, 2 million in their initial capital is never going to be enough, right? And then, or they just make bad decisions in the way that their inventory, they just don't get they just don't know what they don't know, and they won't seek the information out, and they never scale. To me, it's not just money, it's this mindset and making good decisions, and their mindset is making them make bad decisions. So in your experience of working with the startups that are scaling, or executives that have come to you that say, I'm afraid I'm going to miss my number, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to be able to do this, talk to the audience about what would be indicators, or what would be something that says operationally you need to be reprogrammed, because you are going to do disservice to your investors, to your employees, and to your own potential future of your own belief in you being able to achieve what you deserve, because you're hitting these walls in different areas.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that happen in a startup, right? For it to scale. Um, but typically when we train entrepreneurs, whether they're brand new all the way to they've been running it for 3 to 5 years, or even ones that have exited, we actually work with a lot of entrepreneurs that are on their way to exit and or have just exited. So my biggest piece of advice will be actually very similar to what this gentleman has just recently experienced. So I can't give details on every single thing, but what I did hear back, and what I did get as a testimonial was, so this gentleman met us about 16 months ago. Yep, 16 months ago. Joined our training. We asked him, what do you want? Because that's important for us to know. And he said, I would like to exit my company in about 4 to 5 years. And and I would like $100 million. And we're like, where are you at? He said, our company is at about 44, but I would like to exit with 100 mil in 4 to 5 years. Right. And he has partners. So long story short, we're like 4 to 5 years. And I'm getting to the point of what I actually would recommend the strategy. 4 to 5 years. If you just work hard, you'll get there in 4 to 5 years, right? If you work really hard. He's like, yeah, it's still unpredictable, but I think we can get there. I'm like, then there's no point in you joining our training if we can't accelerate that. And if you're here, we expect you to have accelerated that, right? He's like, right. I'm like, so what would be a number that would cause you to be ecstatic, completely life changing in terms of time frame? He's like, well, I don't know, 2 years. That would cut it down by 2.5 times, right? Or 2 times. I'm like, that's good. That's good. That's a good start because most entrepreneurs will set goals that, and I want the listeners to listen to this very carefully. Most entrepreneurs will set goals that are just big enough so that they can work really hard, because working hard is very predictable. We all know that advice works. If we just work hard enough consistently over periods of time, we will hit a result, right? But the problem is, along the way, they may lack motivation because there will be setbacks, there'll be money issues, there'll be operational issues, there'll be all that. So that time frame, the pro does not justify the cons. So entrepreneurs will fail along the way.
Uh-huh.
If they set a goal, however, that is so much bigger, their mind will have no choice. It cannot just work harder to achieve. It will have no choice but to unlock new resources. The entrepreneurs that set goals that are so big, way beyond what they are capable of achieving by working hard within a short period of time, they now then get to force their unconscious mind for an unlock. And when that's where we step in, the upgrade provides the tools, right? And when that tool is installed, it's beautiful. So the gentleman, just to give the outcome, and I'll share some tools too. So it's not just going to tell you there are some tools. So instead of 5 years, 14 months was what it took for him to sell for 110 mil for him.
There you go.
And that was October 1st of this year. And save 4 years. I mean, that's worth a lot, saving 4 years.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, and always I tell them, look, the sale does not mean it's over. That means your milestone. Because every entrepreneur and investor who comes through our training, because we train both sides of the spectrum, so we get a more complete understanding of what's going on this side, what's going on this side, and we found that investors or entrepreneurs, they're flip sides, right? Because sometimes entrepreneurs, they sell, they become investors.
Hmm.
Investors may go start a business. So anyway, I'm like, this is just a milestone. Please make sure you have many decades of goals that follow this, because that's when entrepreneurs go and do sometimes stupid things or waste their money or frankly give it all away, which is fine. But if they want to build generational wealth, giving it all away may or may not do it, right?
Yeah,
So
right. Right. So that's the difference between long-term and short-term goals, I guess. So within that spectrum of goals, because, I mean, most people have heard the idea of set goals, but clearly they don't set them properly. Right. I mean, I've heard the whole actionable, tangible, got to
smart goals.
define time and,
Yep.
things like that. But one of your clips that I watched talked about that unlocking piece, because if you won't, your mind won't understand why you're doing this short term thing if it doesn't know what it's building to for the long term. So address the better way. It's not just a vision board. It's not just writing down a thing, because I've written down the list and stuck it in an envelope and mailed it to myself to see it a year later. I've done all that stuff. So talk about it even for my own benefit. I'm going through your 21 secrets or your
Oh,
21
nice.
steps. So talk
Yes.
about that and talk about, better methods for actually doing goals. Like
Be
that's
happy
that.
to. The biggest secret is time frame. And time frame, space and time, frankly. But time frame is what people oftentimes miss, meaning that most entrepreneurs, most investors even, they only look at the next year, if that, right? They may even look at 5 years, but most people just talk about 5 years. They never set 5 year goals.
Yeah.
And then majority of the population don't even know what they're doing next week. So the challenge with that short-term thinking is they're reactive. And when they're reactive, it requires more resources to support that person. And they're constantly more under stress because the stress is a thing when the internal resources don't meet the external demand. And well, why would the internal resources not meet the external demand? Well, it's because they didn't plan ahead. So imagine this. Imagine we go on a voyage. We take a ship. We're like, okay, we're gonna go somewhere. And if we were to go from, let's say, New York City to Florida, it's probably okay. Like it's not that far. We can take some resources and we can stop along the coast, we can pack up. But if we're gonna go down to Brazil, we probably would want more resources, right? And if we were to go not only to Brazil, but we're going to turn over uh, and go over the Atlantic and then go up the coast of West Africa, we definitely need to plan resources because that's a longer voyage. And but if I told you that's not it, we're gonna actually go into the Mediterranean, come back out, go up the Nordic, and then somehow we're gonna land over. We're gonna go to the North Pole. We come back down, and long story short, we're gonna go all the way to Asia and then through Hawaii and back. You would be like, William, we better pack. We better
Yeah.
hire a crew. We better have the right ship. We better have everything, right? We gotta have backup plans on backup plans on backup plans and communication systems. Well, most humans don't think about their next however many decades. Let's just assume with where medical technology is going and longevity science, we're all, let's say, we'll live to 120, 130, who knows, right? It's possible. Let's just say that. Well, let's say someone's in their 30s or 40s and they're like, okay, well, that's 80, 90 years left. How many of them are thinking about 90-year plans? Almost nobody, right? And
Sure.
so we've implemented 3 levels of planning when people engage with us and upgrade. And in fact, the first level, it's free. We share with the world the 90-year plan, which is in that 21-day focus challenge. It's free on our website. We teach them 90-year plan. Well, when someone engages us at like higher level trainings, we start talking about 1,000-year plan.
Oh,
Now that's legacy level stuff, right? We're not
sure.
going to say you're going to live 1,000 years, but if you were to have your influence lasting over 1,000 years, how would you plan it? And then at the highest level of our training, we actually start inviting people to consider and actually make plans over the next million years,
Wow.
which sounds really out there. But here's why we do this. When we consider only short periods of time in this dimension, where we call the fourth dimension that we live in, space and time, right? 3D plus time. If we only think about a week or a year or 5 years, our awareness and our boundary of the mind neurologically would be quite limited. So that also will include our family, our romantic goals, as well as even our business goals. If you look at the global population, there's a reason our population is declining in general in many of the developing countries and Japan and even China now and or many of the European countries are falling in terms of the population that can actually help the GDP grow, right? So why is that? Well, because there's a lot of short-term thinking, unfortunately,
Hmm.
right? In the past. Nowadays, the leaders are catching up. They're thinking longer term about that, trying to solve it. But this is something that we ought to think not just 90 years, we got to think bigger. And when we think bigger, we stretch our boundary, which actually causes us to think bigger. And that's what most entrepreneurs and investors need, because when they do think bigger, they cease to make those decisions that are reactive. They begin to create more win-wins because they realize their impact is greater than just them and longer term. And then lastly, the challenge that most faced when they set goals that are too small, which cause them to limit themselves, will disappear because now they'll think, well, I can't set a goal that's that small because that'll be achieved in a year or 5 years. What about my 10-year goal, 30-year goal? It has to be bigger. So they're presupposing much bigger goals, which then gives the mind an opportunity to expand ahead of time, prepare ahead of time, and unlock resources ahead of time so that we can achieve more in far less time.
Bravo. Great. That's good stuff, William. So y'all go to upgrade.com, upgrd.com, and opt-in box is down the page to get the 21-day thing. What other, you mentioned earlier, tools, anything else you want to make sure you share with the audience before we wrap up?
Oh, yes, thank you. So we have God Mode, the podcast. People are welcome to listen to it. It's completely free. It's on iTunes and Spotify. God Mode, which was inspired by the 80s video game cheat codes, because we thought, you know what, somebody's got to be studying this. And then we couldn't find anyone. What's the cheat code to be the ultimate entrepreneurs or ultimate investors in terms of mind performance, mental performance, right? And so we navigated in the space and spent a lot of time and a ton of money, have our own science research team, and develop some great things that we share. Of course, we have trainings that are not free, but these are all free materials that we're talking about. And if people are interested in testing out what we charge in terms of our charge packages, we have anything from $49 a month to $2 million. But I recommend people just getting to know us, jump into our $49 a month, also on the website, and they get some way premium training stuff, some that even programs the mind when we're sleeping and resting so that it can do a lot of upgrade even when we're not thinking. Just like our smartphones, we can hit upgrade and then wake up and it's a new operating system.
Reboot. Reboot
Yes,
your dreams and goals and achievements.
indeed. Indeed.
Indeed. So very good. I think we pretty much covered all the things I wanted to cover in this as far as I guess one thing we didn't really cover, but I think it still kind of goes in there, and that's the FOMO. I would think that based on what you've said so far, when an investor, like I had done a podcast on the Theranos debacle, right? For those that aren't familiar with that, that's the entrepreneur, the system that was supposed to be able to take a drop of blood and be able to do this testing across the board, and the founder CEO of that raised, I don't know if it was billions of dollars,
So
but
much.
definitely hundreds of millions of dollars. And basically the technology didn't work. We don't, just all kinds of stuff. And so she was found
It's a
guilty.
problem. It's a problem,
And
right?
there was some of like the very first ones. I think they sometimes, investors have a thing where they'll throw bad money after good because they're believing that if they put enough money in this, it'll solve it. And then you had, because these certain investors are in there, you had a whole bunch of people that just had a lot of money and put it in there that maybe shouldn't have put that much in there. I think some of our elected officials and appointed officials and stuff, but they just felt they followed after because they didn't want to miss out. And so even though, like, I looked at it and I'm like, there's the red flags. She won't show you financials. She won't show you the intellectual property. Those two things right there should have been disqualifiers, but still hundreds of millions of dollars were raised on this fear of missing out. And so is that in part because when presented with the opportunity, depending on who it comes from, that potential investor doesn't want to be, their internal wiring is going like, oh, I don't want to be considered stupid that I missed out of this, or I don't want to look back and say, oh, I could have, should have done that, and I had an opportunity. What triggers people to be like lemmings and just follow after the crowd to invest in something where they could lose money, which should have, or they're feeling the issues like, oh, I don't know about this merger that I should do. I don't know if the corporate cultures are right, if it's going to be good for my people, whatever. What makes people move forward with bad decisions?
I love this question, and it's very important. FOMO is definitely one of the reasons. One of the things that came to mind when you're talking about that entire case, I think that if someone doesn't design who they want to invest with, they may fall into that trap, right?
Mhm.
And oftentimes we think, oh, investors are, they have a system to evaluate, and many of them do. But when it comes to really making a decision, we know that humans make decisions based on emotions. But what's that emotion based on? Well, through very extensive studies, we have found that decisions that we make when it comes to investing or any sort of actions when it comes to entrepreneurial pursuits is based on status. So what I'm saying is, if a project has enough status,
Okay.
it can push the investor over the edge, even when other things don't make sense. And that actually, it's not that far-fetched when it comes to even dating, when it comes to getting a job, when it comes to people making a lot of life decisions. They're checking status because in our brain, in the primal parts of our brain, we look at status as actually the ultimate symbol of safety and access and resource.
Hmm.
So if someone looks at a project or a deal and it has status because they have, who knows, elected officials investing in it, big, huge firms investing in it, already lots of money, and they're very well presented, media attention, even celebrity endorsement, all of a
Hmm.
sudden, whoa, I should invest. I don't even know. I don't even need to know type of thing. But that's not how I would recommend most of our investors. I always recommend design who you want to invest with because your mind will filter out those who are not a good fit. And you need to keep a spreadsheet like how I did back in. And if I may share a teeny bit of detail, I
Okay.
think it'll help. So when I was designing the one in terms of relationship back then, coming from an engineering background, I wrote it into mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and even her preference of food, whether she likes to travel or not, and a number of other things that matter to me. Because I'm like, if I'm not going to design it, who's gonna, right? So I design it and then I prioritize these rows and columns. And I had a scoring system to keep myself accountable. Because we know that as humans, we set goals. We oftentimes will find the path of least resistance and we will go for it and call it good. But I was like, no, it has to be a 90+% match, or otherwise I keep looking. That is what investors should also do. They need to set a standard of what they will go after. And at the end of the day, even if they feel good, they should not go back on their standard.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, William, thank you for sharing that because it was I did not, everybody listening and has listened before, I did not pay him to say that. Not about, obviously about his wife, but about the creating this, like, it's like idea of what is your invest. Now I only figured it out. I've been working with angel investors for 20 years. And I often thought that they just were brilliant and knew this stuff, right? And so it was in my own figuring out why is it that they make these mistakes and invest emotionally on things that should be clearly obvious, or they're investing in something that doesn't really have a path, or the entrepreneur doesn't have a path to how it's going to scale and venture, or they invest in stuff they can't say no to their brother's nephew's friends deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have all this, they have this, and why is that? Well, they don't know why and how and what to invest. They don't understand their own avatar, their own risk tolerance, their own knowledge level. And even though it was a tool that was in with the book, and for those that are watching, it's behind me, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, and it's always in the show notes,
Oh, that is awesome.
right? So I
Such
have it.
synchronicity.
I know I
Love
have
it.
a tool that's in there where they first go through and they figure out how much money they have and how much they want to allocate. They go through their um like what they know, either from hobbies, official education, work experience, things like that, so they can then judge on industries which ones that they are right?
That's
And then
amazing.
building a blueprint of different stages, later stage, middle stage, reoccurring revenue stage, it's royalty financing. And so now I officially call it the Angel Profitability Blueprint. And I've got, I'm
I gotta
launching
check
my
this
digital
out.
course
That's awesome.
to be able to show people exactly how to do that, how to take 10 companies, build a portfolio of 10 companies that will give you short-term revenue, midterm, and hopefully hit some of the big ones that go out of the park as part of that. But
Well, I
you
gotta
know
check
that
this
you're
out then.
investing in
That
the,
looks
yeah.
good.
So you just said all that stuff. I was like, wow, that is like exactly perfect. Yes, that is what I am teaching people to do too.
Everybody needs to check this out. That's awesome.
So
Now I know where to refer people to when they want to learn how to do that.
yeah, very good, very good. I will be. It'll be. It is my big goal, big audacious goal. What are they? The BBG, the big audacious goal, right? And so launching this class in 2024 is with the first baby step in that,
Love it.
or one of many baby steps. But anyhow, so all right. So I think we're really at our time. Anything else, based on that last little rah-rah that you want to
Hey,
add here
this
at
is
the end?
perfect. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been really, really fun to chat with you about this.
Very good. Very good. I've really enjoyed it too. And I know I'll be listening to this one again. That's one of the things. I don't know if I'm just weird, but I actually like to listen to my own podcast sometimes because I interview wonderful people like you and I learn something while I'm in it, but because I'm paying attention so I can act, respond, I'll pick up two or three more things the next time I listen to it again. So that's, and
Love
I know
that.
other people tell me that they do listen to my shows more than once. So this will be one. Everybody bookmark this one because you're going to want to listen to this again. And please go to upgrade.com. Again, that there is no vowels in that. Well, I guess use a vowel,
Yeah,
upgrd.com and get your 21 days, get started, start out 2024 strong and soak it all up. And I'm really
great
looking forward
time.
to staying in touch with you, William, and seeing what
Likewise.
comes.
Likewise. Thank you, Karen. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. Been an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Onwards and upwards, everybody.